Have you ever finished brushing your hair, glanced down, and suddenly panicked at the strands left behind? Or maybe you've stepped into the shower, looked at the drain, and wondered if you're secretly going bald. It's one of those everyday moments that almost everyone experiences, yet very few people actually understand. Seeing hair fall out can be alarming because we tend to think every strand lost is gone forever. But is that really how it works? The truth is, losing hair is completely normal. In fact, if you never shed any hair at all, that would actually be a sign that something isn't working properly. So how much hair loss should you expect? When is it perfectly healthy, and when should it be a reason to pay attention? Today, we're separating myth from fact as we explore the fascinating life cycle of your hair right here on History of Simple Things. It may seem like your hair simply grows until you cut it, but every strand is actually on its own schedule. At any given moment, the hairs on your head are in different stages of life. Most of your hair, about 85 to 90%, is actively growing. This stage can last anywhere from 2 to 7 years, depending largely on your genetics. That's why some people can naturally grow hair down to their waist, while others find that their hair seems to stop getting longer after reaching their shoulders. After the growing phase comes a short transition period, where the hair stops growing and prepares to detach from the follicle. Finally, it enters the resting phase. After a few months of resting, the strand naturally falls out, making room for a brand new hair to grow in its place. So when you see a few strands on your pillow or in your comb, chances are you're simply witnessing this endless cycle of renewal. The number you've probably heard most often is between 50 and 100 hairs per day. While that isn't a strict rule, it's a useful average for healthy adults. At first, that sounds like a lot. Imagine counting out 100 strands of hair. It seems alarming. But remember, the average human head contains roughly 100,000 hair follicles. Losing 100 hairs means you're shedding only about 0.1% of your total hair each day. Most people don't notice this gradual loss because new hairs are constantly replacing the old ones. The balance between shedding and regrowth keeps your hair looking just as full. In other words, finding hair in your brush every day is usually a sign that your scalp is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. If you've ever noticed that some days your shower drain looks much worse than others, don't worry. It doesn't necessarily mean you're suddenly losing hair faster. For example, if you usually wear your hair tied back or skip washing it for a couple of days, many of the loose hairs simply stay trapped until you finally brush or wash your hair. It can look like you've lost a huge amount all at once, when in reality, those hairs were ready to fall out over several days. Seasonal changes may also play a role. Some studies suggest that people tend to shed slightly more hair during late summer and early autumn, although scientists are still investigating exactly why this happens. Stress, illness, and hormonal changes can also temporarily increase shedding. The important thing to remember is that not every increase in hair fall means permanent hair loss. While daily shedding is expected, there are situations where it's worth paying closer attention. One common condition is called telogen effluvium. This happens when a large number of hairs enter the resting phase at the same time. Instead of losing around 100 hairs a day, people may suddenly notice much larger amounts coming out while washing or brushing their hair. Interestingly, the trigger often happened months earlier. A high fever, surgery, childbirth, rapid weight loss, severe emotional stress, or even certain medications can push many hair follicles into their resting phase. 2 or 3 months later, those hairs begin falling out together. The good news is that in many cases, this type of hair loss is temporary. Once the body recovers, normal hair growth often resumes. Many people assume that any hair falling out is the beginning of permanent baldness. Fortunately, that's usually not the case. Normal shedding happens evenly across the scalp, with new hairs replacing the old ones. Pattern baldness, on the other hand, is different. Instead of simply losing more hairs, the follicles gradually shrink over time. Each new hair grows thinner and shorter until eventually some follicles stop producing visible hair altogether. That's why someone with pattern baldness doesn't necessarily notice huge clumps of hair falling out every day. Instead, they gradually see a widening part, a receding hairline, or thinning at the crown over months or years. Understanding this difference can save a lot of unnecessary worry. Since shedding is a natural process, you can't and shouldn't try to stop it completely. However, you can create healthier conditions for your hair to grow. Eating enough protein, iron, zinc, and vitamins helps support healthy hair growth. Gentle hair care also matters. Excessive heat styling, harsh chemical treatments, or constantly pulling your hair into tight hairstyles can weaken strands and even damage hair follicles over time. Managing stress is another important factor. While stress doesn't usually cause instant baldness, prolonged physical or emotional stress can disrupt the hair growth cycle and increase temporary shedding. And despite countless advertisements promising miracle solutions, no shampoo can completely prevent normal hair shedding because the process begins inside the hair follicle beneath your skin. Hair may seem simple, but every strand is part of an incredibly organized system that's constantly renewing itself. What feels like hair loss is often just the normal rhythm of growth, rest, shedding, and replacement that has been happening every day of your life. So the next time you notice a few strands on your brush or in the shower, remember that your scalp is likely doing exactly what nature intended. Losing around 50 to 100 hairs a day isn't a sign that you're going bald. It's actually a sign that your hair is making room for the next generation of healthy strands. Of course, if shedding suddenly becomes excessive or comes with noticeable thinning, it's worth investigating. But for most people, those loose hairs are simply part of an invisible cycle that keeps your hair growing year after year. Sometimes, understanding the ordinary is the best way to put our biggest worries into perspective. And that's exactly what makes these simple questions so fascinating. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.